Good morning, my outstandingly wonderful, exquisite, outstanding friends. What am I going to be talking about today? We're going to be continuing on with the Velikovsky series. And this was the last one I just did. It was called Documented Deluge Account, deeply researched by Velikovsky. Now, I have followed him very carefully forever. And I discovered Mudfossils and realized the same opposition that he realized. So I wrote a book called Mudfossils and Velikovsky and Minds in Collision. He wrote Worlds in Collision, and it was so spectacular that the scientific community destroyed him because he had the audacity to speak up against them with evidence supported by the documentation in the past. Now, I've gone through this very deeply, and he's, as far as I can see, he is the one that has all the supported evidence. And we're going to be going through it very, very deeply. It's going to be a long series. And I can see other people are now coming back on board to support Velikovsky. He was destroyed, and 99% of the people breathing oxygen right now have no clue who he was, none whatsoever. And the other 1%, almost all of them, laugh hysterically when you mention his name because they still demean and deny everything that he actually physically went out and did the research on. He went and did the documentation at all the libraries, museums, tombs, caves, everywhere. He had all the papyruses, he had tablets, he went to South America, he went to literally every culture, and every one of them had a similar story. Little bit details here, a little bit details there that were different. Same exact dates and same general devastation of the earth, a cataclysm. And he completely unveiled it, and he was destroyed. Well, he will be resurrected. Now, this is somebody else that's jumping on board here. Velikovsky Reconsidered. And this goes back to, I believe, it's 1976. I'm not certain. I really haven't watched this yet. But we're going to watch it together because I want everybody to be involved in this. Anybody that's talking about Velikovsky, I want to be part of that conversation because I understand pretty well what he had to say. And there's another guy, Greg J., who is deeply invested in Velikovsky's theories and trying to understand them. And he's done a whole ton of videos basically reading his books. And that's all you have to do is read the books and think about it. But you have to think about it with an open mind. You go there with the attitude that you're going to fight everything he says. You're never going to learn anything. Because the first things that I hear from everybody is, oh, that's impossible. That can't be. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Oh, that's... And then right then, you know, at that point, you've lost them. Until they start asking questions. And that almost never happens. Virtually never happens. No questions at all. It's strictly just denials. That's the new system we're in. It's academic denial of reality. And it's been happening since the Age of Enlightenment. As soon as we decided we were just too smart to listen to anybody that ever said anything in the past, we were lost. And now we are never been lost more than we are now. So this is Electric Universe Eyes. We're going to be going and reconsidering the truth of our past. And Velikovsky discovered and researched as deeply as anybody alive has ever done our past. Now, I have a lot to add to this, and a lot of people have a lot to add to this because there's been a lot of new discoveries since all the new CAT scans and DNA and, you know, all the new space research and so forth. They're finding out things that they just... Every time you read something about space or anything now, we never expected this. Totally unexpected. Absolutely phenomenal. We just have no and they don't have any idea. They don't even know how gravity works. You drop something to the floor, they don't even know how that happens. They don't know what if light is a particle, a wave. They have no idea what it is. Science is just so backwards now. It's just unbelievable. And it's because of the people that have been put in charge are incompetent and self-absorbed. 100% of them, as far as I can determine, not one of them has any competent level that I can determine, or they're just frauds and liars. It's either one or the other. And that's been going on forever. And they remarked on this in the documentary they did on Velikovsky on TV. They said it's unbelievable. Nobody was willing to pay attention to the truth, and that's just never going to end. We just have to stand up for ourselves. So that's what we're going to do. Here it goes. Now, this is Velikovsky Reconsidered. Again, I haven't watched this. We're going to watch it together and talk about what people are saying about Velikovsky, because that's the key. What is everybody saying?
And today, I'm going to read from the book, Velikovsky Reconsidered, by the editors of Pense, editor Stephen L. Talbot, associate editors Louis M. Greenberg, Ralph E. Juergens, William Mullen, C.J. Ransom, and Lynn E. Rose. Preface: Collisions and Upheavals. A fragmentary scenario based on Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision and Earth in Upheaval. Emanuel Velikovsky manifests a strong distaste for summaries and popularizations of his books. In the past, many erroneous criticisms of his work have been based upon such popularizations, the critics never having studied his books. And indeed, these books, detailed in their arguments and exhaustive in their documentation, do not easily lend themselves to summarization. Nevertheless, in embarking on a project designed to give the fullest possible coverage of all aspects of Velikovsky's work, the editors of Pense felt it desirable to reacquaint readers with the flow of events described in his revolutionary reconstruction of recent solar system history.
Let me just mention to you what he does say. This is Velikovsky's claims. He said the Earth was in upheaval. There was a cataclysm of unimaginable proportions, 1500 BC. This is the BC. This is the time of the Exodus. It was reported that Venus was a fiery comet, literally born from the feared god Jupiter. And that fiery comet was 800 degrees. That's what Velikovsky said. Everybody else said, no, it's 80 or 90 degrees. Well, it turned out to be 800 degrees. Velikovsky was right. It almost hit the Earth, and that was all recorded everywhere on the planet in 1500 BC. They said the waters fell on the Earth. The Earth was wrenched. There was catastrophic lightnings and fires and thunderbolts and lava and belching gases all over the Earth. The waters boiled from this almost impact of this comet almost hitting Earth. There was fires, there was floods, there was lightning. Then after that, as the tail passed by, there was blood and stones and oils and so forth fell all over the Earth. And then it went and it destroyed Mars. Literally, I don't know whether it wiped the atmosphere or actually hit Mars. I don't know about that. But we are going to see what people are saying and what Velikovsky said and how people are interpreting what he said. Because a lot of, you have to, like he said, it doesn't lend itself to a quick read. This is deep. This is not just a surface, oh yeah, they had this and had a nice day and everybody went home and that was the end of the story. And oh good, have a nice day. But no, this is a serious story. And it takes some serious time to investigate it. And I did, and I wrote a book about it. I know I talked about this over and over, but I did. And I did because I encountered the exact identical opposition he did. Only I have specimens and DNA and CAT scans. And everybody now understands mud fossils are real. They were preserved soft body tissue parts, and they appear to be preserved in the Great Flood, because almost every one of them is flat as a pancake on one side. Even my goose, Caesar, see his feathers? That's perfect on that side, but this side here was laying down flat, because it was in the flood. And they all were in this same condition. They were in the flood, well, not all of them necessarily, but the ones I had CAT scan, hold on. This is a human lung. This is our size human lung. And I have giants too, so they're not just one size. You see how flat that is? It died flat on his back. And Velikovsky said the oceans boiled. So the people and the creatures that were alive, they were like parboiled. And then they were drowned, obviously, parboiled. And then they became nucleophilically invaded because all of the really rotty tissue stuff is boiled out. I didn't realize that until just recently, to be perfectly honest. I just considered that they were drowned because it was a big flood. But no, if they were boiled in that flood, huge difference on the preservation aspect. And the preservation is so phenomenal. It puzzled me, to be perfectly honest with you, but it was what it was. So if I can see what it was, like, let me show you this giant fingertip, how exactly, exquisitely perfect it is. How did that happen? I think now it was boiled first. All right, this, I got to be honest with you, it did perplex me when I first found them. They were so perfect. That is a perfectly preserved fingertip. The flesh, the pad of the bone in the back, the fingernail, even the fingerprints. I mean, it's absolutely flawless. The skin, everything. The blood was still in it. The DNA was flawless, they said. It was Eclipse, excellent quality DNA. There's the fingerprints. These are the sweat pores. See the sweat pores in there? That's them right there. My finger is the same size as one of the finger ridges. It's gigantic, gigantic creature. And I have other ones too on my property. This must have been an area that was subject to some kind of boiling and then quickly drained off, or I don't know what. But my property, I have 10 acres of stone walls and things. Did I just go out and pick them up? I didn't have to dig for any of this stuff. A little bit here and there, but not much. And the only reason I dug for it was because they dug up to add a little office here. That when they did, they dug up well, here's what they dug up. Hold on. This came right out of the ground. It's a gigantic hand. That's a left hand. That's the tendon in the hand. This is the only one that really, this is the stuff that came out of the ground. The rest of the stuff didn't come out of the ground. It's just laying on the ground. And this one here, I found all the, because it was buried in the same spot, and all those things were with it, the fingertips and the bones and the knuckles and all that stuff. And that's the palm of the hand. But it's only out to like here. It's only out to like there. All right, that's where the left thumb would have gone. This is the grip skin. See all the silvery skin, how it's peeling up there? You see it? Just like that other big fingertip. Now this is like, I think it's about a little over 3 feet wide, something like that. And that's the bumper pad on your hand. Just look at it careful. Look at your own hand. There it is. And this was DNA tested, human. The big one that I showed you with the fingerprints, DNA tested, human. The lung I showed you, DNA tested, human. My buddy Caesar here, never tested, but I can tell you one thing, that's an avian creature of some sort. And this is nucleophilic substitution. You can see the neck in there, but it's converted into whatever was in the waters, just like this. It's converted basically into mud. But inside the veins and arteries, they still have blood. I mean, literally blood. Let me just show you that, because I need to validate the fact that the things that I'm talking about, I can support. There's blood coming out of these stones. And inside the stones, it's preserved in these tubes. The tubes don't go bad. The tubes are made there to stay literally forever. And that's the backing, the fibrin clotting factor that holds the blood scabs. And here's the actual holes in the vein, the artery, which gives you the red blood, and the vein, which has the black blood. And that's what happens inside these bone holes, these foramen, they call them. So hopefully that shows you that these things were here. There were giants on the earth in those days. A lot of the things that were recorded in the historical documents, the Bible, the Hesiod's work, Ovid, all of that stuff, it appears to be supported by the evidence on the ground. So now we either look at it or we turn our backs away from it for another 10,000 years. It's ridiculous to hide from reality, and that's what's happening now. Very distressing. So Velikovsky he stuck up for himself, and I'm going to stick up for myself too. I'll go down swinging, and he did too. And that's how it's going to happen. Because I can tell you what, unless you stand up, nobody will stand up. It'll never be heard. And if you're afraid to stand up, well, you're just going to have to walk around in circles with the rest of them and just giggle and pretend that everybody's smart that goes to school and is told what to say, and then pays to be told what to say, and then is intimidated to say, if you don't say what I tell you what to say, I'll fail you in life. And then peer review is like racketeering to back that fact up so that they can't allow anybody else to speak. That's why I've been kept at bay. And, I've been doing this a very long time, and I've had all this evidence for a minimum of 5 or 6 years, with the DNA, the CAT scans, the specimens, the anatomists, the chemistry. Now I have 100% evidence to back up, and they won't allow it to be seen. So what do you do about that? You do exactly what we're doing here. We do it on our own. All right, let's just start off with this. This is a solar eclipse. So this is the moon completely surrounding the sun. So we can't see the actual glow of the sun, but we can see all the rays and the particles shooting off of here in every different direction. Those are not just waves of nothing, which is what the scientists, they don't even realize. These are particles. They're actually particles that are flowing everywhere in space. So we are scrubbing through those particles because they're electrically charged particles. Now we're being ripped through the galaxy on one of the arms of the Milky Way. And so everything's going forward. The sun leads all of us, and we're spinning around trying to catch up to the sun because its gravity, its intense dark matter pull is trying to pull us all to it. But it's being ripped through the galaxy. So we're spinning behind it trying to catch up. In addition, we're rotating on our axis. A lot of interaction, because ahead of us is all nothing but particles. There's a zillion particles. Some days there's going to be only some particles. Other days there's going to be bazillions of particles. It depends on what we're running into, and I'll show you that in the galaxy, because there are different densities right within our own galaxy. Just use a little bit of common sense here. Just any glow you see here means energetic. Anytime you see any glow, it means it's illuminated. It's emanating something out. Particles are flowing out and they bang into your eyeballs, and that's how you can see them. Now we use CMOS, a complementary metal oxide semiconductor chips, to inside its cell phones and inside it. They use them everywhere now because they're so efficient, and they're used in the same at CERN. They use the same thing, and all they're doing is picking up high energy particles, bang, and that's how you can see these high energy areas. Now we're spinning through here. We might go through here. There's nothing there. There's no high energy things to pack in. But here, we're smashing forward on the same lines. Where you see these lines, they're interacting with each other. They're banging into each other. Now, if we were in a space like this where we were banging and all of a sudden we walked into an empty area, well, maybe we're okay. But what if we were in this empty area and all of a sudden we banged into a glowy area? A whole different situation then. And as we spin, this whole thing wrenches in, and it's crushing itself as it condenses, and that's what causes black holes. And the black hole is nothing more than the dark matter part being pushed to the center and the glowy part surrounding it. And that's electron flood theory. I've shown it a bazillion times as well. All right, now this is basically what's happening. Is the sun is emitting particles. Well, the particles have charges on them. And basically they're photons, electrons, but they're going to have negative particles attached to them. A negative particle will push another negative particle. All of our gases have negative particles in them as well, and they're pretty much held around our Earth by the pull of our magnetic field. Same with the sun. It's trying to hold everything close to itself. Well, the ones that are breaking away have to smash into the other particles that are out here. You don't see them, but they're there. And when they concuss with them, they scrub. And this is the main scrub between us and the sun's particles, right where during the daytime where it's scrubbing, it gets hotter than hell. And that gives you the enormous amount of increased electrons in this layer, which you call the ionosphere. Ionosphere means, ions mean nothing but extra electrons. And that's where they collect. And they scrub. 2,700 degrees out here, 100 on the surface, 7,000 on the surface, millions in the corona. Same thing with Venus. Venus would come through here like rockets shipping through here with its surrounding field, bam, right against ours, and that would just give us an increase. Just like here, millions of degrees, because the temperature coming in would just be astronomical. The more push, the more shove. during the day, we're just getting hit with the electrons coming down. Can you imagine a comet coming in at us, which is the same size as the Earth almost, and having that, and banging our atmosphere with its atmosphere? Exactly what Velikovsky said would happen. And they said it did happen, and it was documented it happened. So I'm going with that. And if anybody wants to talk to me about why the corona here is 1,000,000 degrees and the surface 7,000 and our Earth is 100 and it's 2,700 out here, I think they should start to think about what we're actually rubbing through. And this greenhouse gas thing is nonsense. It's the expansion of the envelope that is creating more and more push, because this is just going to keep coming the same way it does. We get bigger and bigger, it's more and more scrub. That means more turbulence, more hurricanes, more violence, more tornadoes, more lightning, more storms, more concussion, more condensation, more rain, other areas that are going to be dry. It's a totally turmoil on the Earth now. And as the Earth spins and this masses of gas hit solid places on the Earth, everything changes. That's why we're having such terrible fires and droughts in the West, and on the East we're having such terrible flooding and so forth, because the compression on the East is hitting the water first, and by the time you get out West, you got nothing left, and it's a whole different, it's a whole new scenario. It should be sort of an even flow across the surfaces of the Earth, but it's piled up higher. The water's down here. The Earth is up here. As it comes, this concusses. That's compression. Compression is condensation. Condensation is when water molecules start to form. By the time it gets out to the west, by the time you get way out here, hitting again, there's no more water left, because it's condensed it and it's forced it to fall in Louisiana and all over the East Coast, and where its first initial impacts are. These are the kind of things they're not paying attention to. And there's other things, but it is the expansion of our gases. And yes, it is combustion, no question whatsoever. Carbon dioxide, no question whatsoever. But it's not the gas holding the heat in. It's the gases expanding, scrubbing harder. That's the key. And if they don't understand that, we don't understand anything. Well, we don't understand anything right now. I'm telling you, the people that are doing the research are just totally lost. And the reason is because they're trying to work with the Bohr model. Never worked. It's electron flood theory. Everything there is made out of electrons. And they can find them. They've seen them. They know that they break protons apart, and they get down to these tiny little particles, muons and bosons and fermions and they call them all kinds of things. But the tiniest particles there is light, and light can be divided into its actual positive and negative parts. We've done it. I've shown it hundreds of times. Like I said, I've shown this so many times, it's getting old now. Muon neutrinos, electron neutrinos, a black and a white ball attached together. The muon, the black ball, stays black. The white turns into a shower. There's the black ball. There's the showers. Now, let's just show you what they look like as this whole event is unfolding. All right, this is light in a red pulse laser. This is accelerated because we created a tuned Venturi that only allows the white through and the black is separated. This is the particle, and the black and the white ball was attached. Well, you just saw it a second ago. At the Venturi, they break, and the white balls come away from the black. That is fission, because this is a positive, which is dark matter. Nobody's ever seen this before. The dark matter nobody's ever seen. You're never going to see this until you get ready to explode it. And the only people who have seen it is CERN. And they have no idea about it, because all they see is a bunch of debris. And they're seeing black balls and white balls, and sometimes they're attached and sometimes they're apart, and they just have no idea what to do. They are normally attached as electrons. Back to back is a photon. That will bounce from you. An electron will try to incorporate into other electrons, and it will burn. And that's electricity. The other one is light. Light hits here. It explodes into its component parts. The black balls reattach right here instantaneously, because this is the speed of light. So from here to here is not a long time. And then the black balls reattach. I think we can get free energy right here. This is literally an atomic explosion. It's the smaller than the nucleus of particles. It's in the tiniest elementary particle range. They stacked up, boom, 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 and because of the pulsation, it's like AC current, extremely violent, and cause an extreme amount of concussion. This is a total different energy regime here than back here. This is just only, pushing away, get away, get out of my way, get out of my way, get the hell out of my way. And then you got some serious action going here. So if you can harvest this, just think of the increase in, you don't have to be a genius to figure this out. And they say it's 200 times. If you can do what we did, which is the fission, and this is the fusion. Fission means you break the white from the black. There's no mystery. You put them back together, it's fusion. No mystery there. In between is where you got the energy. The mystery is, why aren't we using this? And Fermi Lab refuses to engage. Very, very distressing. They're the ones that are telling everybody in the world how smart they are about looking for muons, spending billions a day probably, when we have people starving to death. And they refuse, absolutely refuse to engage. Don Lincoln there says, not 1 minute will I spend looking at your stuff. You're not peer-reviewed. You're a tinfoil hat guy. And then he blocked me. So that's the kind of people we have working to try to get us free energy. We are in deep trouble. So don't forget, that's just a regular pulsed red laser. Beep, 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 beep. And this is what the end result is. And here's how we get free energy. The laser pulses 5 watts, turns into 200 times more. It's 1,000 watts. If we can collect it at a solar collector using thin film transition metal oxides, we can pull out energy like coming out of your earlobes. And we can drive anything we want with that, any device you want to put in there. Because it's electricity. We can have heating, we can have lighting, we can have refrigeration, we can have motors and cars and motorcycles and boats and planes, and anything you want can be driven with this device. Zero input. Once it starts, it just keeps running. And I hope the Russians or the Chinese or somebody will do it, because the Americans, they couldn't care less. Our government has no interest whatsoever in this. And we're paying them billions and billions and billions of dollars to do this research, and there is no interest there whatsoever in our benefit. I can tell you that. It's all set up for them. It's absolutely unbelievable that they can get away with this, and nobody will respond to me whatsoever. Right, so back to Velikovsky Reconsidered again. Now, don't forget, I showed the particles that surround the Earth and how the atmospheres would collide, how the increase in temperature would happen. It's all very obvious, and you can see it on the subatomic level. It's almost identical. Now, let's just go a little further with this. I'm not sure how much further we're going to go today. This, like I say, this is going to be a lot of absorption. You're going to have to start thinking. You're going to have to start really doing some investigation on your own, because it's a deep subject, and unless you invest yourself into it, you're not going to get much out of this. You're going to just, ooh, this is great. Well, think about it deeply, because this is our past. This is our whole history. And as far as I'm concerned, the people that are assigned to look into these matters, and they are strictly there to enforce the fact that it will not be investigated. It will not be looked into. Anybody that does look into it will be destroyed. And, I've been destroyed, but I don't care, because I really didn't have much to destroy. So if I was trying to be a big shot in science, well, that's a whole different story. I just want a little bit of truth here. I could go out and support everything that they had said and make up a bunch of doodles to make it look like everything that's been said in science now is correct, and they'd love me for it, and I would be put on a pedestal. Well, I don't care about pedestals. I want truth, and truth seems to harbor very close to the mud.
All is ruin. Aware of a link between the circuit of heavenly bodies and the catastrophic ruin of previous generations, the ancients ceaselessly watched the planetary movements. Their traditions recalled that when old epochs dissolved, the new age, or sun, was marked by different celestial paths. Astronomers and seers diligently watched for any change which might augur approaching destruction and the end of an age. Prior to the 2nd millennium BC, ancient Hindu records spoke of 4 visible planets, excluding Venus. Babylonians, meticulous in their observations, likewise failed to report Venus. But long before 1500 BC, Jupiter, for centuries chief among the deities, shattered the serenity of the skies. A brilliant, fiery object, expelled from that planet, entered upon a long
Okay, this is the brilliant, fiery object came out of Jupiter. All right, let's just go back to that 1 second. This is very important to understand. All right, here we go.
BC, Jupiter, for centuries chief among the deities, shattered the serenity of the skies. A brilliant, fiery object, expelled from that planet, entered upon a long elliptical orbit around the sun. The feared god Jupiter had given birth to the comet and protoplanet Venus.
The feared god Jupiter. Now, if you start to read Hesiod and the Theogony, and they talk about the planets and the moons and all of these things being literally gods and bodies of creatures. And from my research, I cannot dispute that whatsoever. And I think I can validate most of all of that. And then there was also talk of battles in the heavens. Now this goes beyond Velikovsky, because he didn't get, I'm going so far off the cliff that, I'm way beyond Velikovsky, which puts me so far out of the stage that, not a single person will talk to me. But I am in reality, and they want to stay in just nonsense. And I'm showing the truth. And I'm showing that the things in space are literally body parts. And the astronauts say when they go on spacewalks and they come back in, they take their suits off, it smells like steak. And that's because it smells like blood. When you cook a steak, that's what's burning out of there is the blood. It smells like burning metals and steak in outer space. And that's exactly what you would smell from the solar rays actually boiling off. And I'm going to show you right now. I'll show you Comet 67P. I did this. I worked not really strictly with the Russians, but I worked with all of their data from, no, I'm sorry, not the Russians, the European Space Agency, when they did Comet 67P. Wide open, it was given to everybody, and they had the Philae lander from the Rosetta mission landed on there, collected samples, analyzed them, 100% biological and organic. They know this, and the body part is there, and an anatomist will tell you, yes, absolutely, no question, it is a body part. All right, this is Comet 67P. This is eroded skin and blood cells and so forth. This is pinchy little bundles of muscle. You see this round? This is a muscle bundle that comes up. These fibers are tendons. And this is, up here would have been where the muscle attached. They break right off where the muscle sticks to the tendon. That's how they transition. And the same thing here. This is where a muscle bundle came up and the muscles broke off, and we can see the tips of the tendons that would have gone down to attach. This is the ball of the tendon that locks in. These are the little anchor spots. These don't fuse off gases because they're not blood vessels. But all around here is blood vessels that run up, and then there's a big artery that comes off, and they shoot out gases like crazy. And here they are right here. You see that? That's an artery. And the reason it's shooting out that huge stream of gases is because the sun is coming straight down into it, cooking them and shooting them off. These are the little anchors that are all around that to hold that ball in. You see them? These are the little blood vessels that come up to service all, because everything has to be serviced with blood, and yet everything has blood vessels coming out of it, and that's why they're going all different directions. They don't just all sweep away because it's going through and the dust is being pushed off. Hell no. That is burning gases, and they're not burning because there's not enough oxygen to literally combust, but they are fusing just like you know, they're cooking off. Let's put it that way. They're creating gases out of the solid molecules which are inside these blood vessels, and this is gigantic. Now you see this? This goes back to February 2015, January 2015. This is when they had the Rosetta mission going on. Now, I have some friends that were involved in this endeavor, and like I say, I had as much information as anybody. I have the spectral analysis of the particles that they analyzed, and I have so much data on this. There's nobody has any more data than I have, because it was nothing hidden that I know of, and I can see what it is. I know what it is. You can see what it is. And there was a bone coming out of here in the middle. Hold on, let me show you what this looks like on top of Raleigh, North Carolina. Now you're going to say, oh, that's just too big. It's impossible. No, it's not. There's things bigger on the face of this planet right now, and I'll show you one. This is Raleigh, North Carolina. This is 67P, Comet 67P. That's the ball of the tendon. That's the stalk, and there was probably a bone coming out of there where the tendon's wrapped around that bone. You see this? Basically, we're looking at something like this, with the tendon sticking out and then a bone inside of it. But that's where all of those little socket balls were, around the edges, and then it wrapped up and they made these little strappy looking things, and then where the muscle attaches, because it attaches to a muscle. Tendon locks into your body somewhere. That's where the balls take their place. Then the straps run out, tough, tough, tough as hell. Then right about somewhere a little ways off, the muscle attaches to the tendon, and that's the weak spot. The muscles are very weak. They erode and turn into mud. All right, you're going to say I'm a fool for talking about just gigantic things and being in space and so forth. I think these things were all from space and then thrown to Earth is all I can think. Because how could a dragon and a fish this size live on Earth? That's a fish. And that fish is hundreds of miles long, many hundreds. And it was it was attacked by a giant dragon. And this dragon is over 1,000 miles long. And this is the spit that the dragon, you know, the flames and so forth, and he tried to kill that fish. And it did invade the tissue. And this is all the stuff that came down to invade it. It's extremely nasty. If you look at this stuff, and you don't see this laying around everywhere. Now, what it is dragon breath. And this is the dragon's head. They have that big bump on their nose. And there's this red, fiery, flamey eye, they called it. And that's pretty red, flamey, and fiery. A lot of it's eroded away. And this is all the flashy stuff you see on the side of dragons in the parades. Exactly what it is. And this is the dragon throat. And these are the scales inside the throat. You see? All the way running down. And these are the scales outside the throat, his armor. You see it? That's his armor. And that's the throat going down inside where he swallows things and spits out nasty stuff. And then this dragon, and this is all the effluent running off from a dead, decaying body. That's just what happens. And it was a red-blooded creature, because his throat was cut. That's a slash. And this is the red blood coming out. This was gashed right through. And this is all written in the ancient texts, that this giant serpent called Typhon had a battle with Zeus, and Zeus cut his neck and threw him down. And it runs all the way from here. These are the legs. It's a red dragon. It runs all the way over, all the way over, all the way down to here. This is towards the end of the tail. You can see all the dragon scales here running, all the effluent running off. And if you get way down to the scales, you can see these are scales. These are dragon scales. You see those? That's you know, that's what I'm seeing as dragon scales. I don't know what you see. And this is what the whole tail runs all the way down here. And these are the flashy little flutes at the end. And there's the body. And I looked at this. This has a cloaca here, which is an avian creature, which is a bird-type creature. Now, that thing's 1,000 miles long. We're talking about a little thing that, a spot this big was showing that tendon ball, not even the size of a BB on here. So the things that were in space, I cannot account for them. They were here, and they were everywhere. It's exactly what they talked about. Quetzalcoatl was right here. This is the feathered serpent. That's his head. It runs all the way up the East Coast. You see, these are feathers up here. Those are feathers. Well, that's not just shifting geography. All right, those are feathers. You have to take your time to think about things a little bit and not just listen to the academics, because they will just dismiss this, walk away, and laugh. This is the feathers that came right out of the top of his head. See, it's the same look. And we could see them actually. If you look at them, you'll see they have that same sort of fluty lookingness to them. You see? And they come right down into the top of his head. Right here. And then you have all this crazy looking stuff on his nose. It runs all the way down around the edge of his nose. You see the color difference? Vegetation grows differently in different stuff. Red blood grows fluffy green moss. Black, the deoxygenated blood grows lichen. It's a white looking stuff. So this is some kind of different material geology, let's call it, than this. But it's the body parts of the dragon is different, and it grows different stuff. And look at this. This is just, I find this bizarre. The whole nose, on the edge of the nose, has this, and I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And that's not your average little. You don't see that very often. And that's on the nose of the dragon. And somebody said they thought this might be some kind of a fish or something. This one's spitting at, trying to kill. I didn't see anything like that down here myself, to be honest with you. But you know, everybody sees what they see. The stuff I see, I'm pretty damn sure about. And if you can't see what I see and see the feathers, and they talked about Quetzalcoatl and the feathered serpent, and they're gigantic. I mean, I can't explain the sizes. I just cannot explain it, and you can't either. So what we have to do is just think, what the hell happened here? And if you read Hesiod, he talks about this event, about Zeus killing Typhon. And the whole story is so bizarre. And Zeus could just give birth to creatures right out of his forehead, like he did Athena. He gave birth to Athena with a thought from his forehead. And she came out, just popped right out of his forehead, fully armored, ready to do battle. These creatures, these gods, that's all they did was fight and kill each other. Absolutely stunning to think of. You know, I guess Zeus was a good guy. He was supposed to be the father of all men and gods. You know, if you read, you got to read the ancient texts and at least consider them. You know, they sound crazy, but isn't that crazy? If that's a dragon, which it is, this is his throat. Now just pay attention. Look at all the length of his throat. That is his whole throat running down all this direction. And then it got cut right here, but it was still running. All right, that's all still his throat. See, that's still his throat. Runs all the way down, all the way down, all the way down, all the way down. Here's another gash that he got cut, and that's a cut too. So, because Zeus hit him a few times with the thunderbolts, but the one that really got him was up on his neck. Here's another couple of hits, but that goes right down into his gut, and down in the gut is where all of the gut stuff happens. But it's all down in there. I went through the whole digestive system, and it ends up coming out with the cloaca at the other end, over in here. I think it's right up in there. He poops. And And cloaca is different than the regular mammals. Avians have a different system. Now, this down here, I believe, was Atlantis. And the whole thing collapsed at the same time. All of this ran out across Atlantis when it fell in. And Atlantis had a straits in front of it. And they always used to say, well, it was just outside the straits of Gibraltar. No. Somebody came up with that by accident. It was just outside the straits of the Sahara. This is the straits of the Sahara right here. And Atlantis owned this straits. And they could control who was allowed to go in and out and trade inside the Sahara region. When this collapsed, everything ran out across around the straits over the top of Atlantis, because Atlantis collapsed. And when it did, it just let all that water run out. And you can see it. There's no question it ran right across there. Anybody that has any idea of how mud flows or water, or, I mean, just a kid playing in a sandbox could understand this. And they don't see this. They don't see this. They say, oh, there was an offshore collapse that caused this, because they know there's a big plain out here of debris, but they say it was an offshore collapse. How could anybody miss this? How could that possibly be missed? And what they did was it created the Cape Verde Islands. It sort of piled up here, and as it piled up, it sort of splayed off to the sides. And that's, Plato says they will never speak of mud again after this event, because so much mud ran out of the Sahara Ocean. And it was an ocean, it's gone. They used to come in here with boats, sail over to Ethiopia and sell their goods over in Egypt. And one day, and there's a lot to be considered in here, because there was more than one catastrophic event. Venus came by at least twice that was catastrophic. And there's stories about the 1177 issue where society, I believe it was in that area again, society collapsed. And then the sea peoples, I got to go back and look at that, but there's a story about the sea peoples just after the first cataclysm of 1500 BC. A little later, there was another cataclysm, and then the people that, I don't know where that cataclysm happened, but then all of the people that were dispersed around the earth came back as the sea people, and they attacked all in Europe and took over Europe. They were very sophisticated, and they probably were some people from Atlantis, because Atlantis was a seafaring nation. They were all over the world, and so a lot of them would have survived somewhere. And apparently they regathered and came across back out, and they conquered all of this area, everywhere. And they came in force and just wiped everybody out. And they called them the sea people. And they say, where do sea people come from? Nobody knows. Well, I think we can understand they were the remnants of probably the second great impact of Venus. That's my take at this moment. But there's a lot of work to be done to see if these dates match up, see what was written, see where it was written, who recorded it, and I looked deeply into the sea people, and I'm almost 100% certain they were attached to Atlantis. And they were the remnants of the Atlantis after the collapse. Somehow they regrouped and came back. I think it was like 200 years later, and just wiped everybody out. Took over and took everything. All right, we're going to look at the sea peoples. The sea peoples remain unidentified in the eyes of most modern scholars. Hypotheses regarding the origin of the various groups are the source of much speculation. Nobody knows where they came from. Existing theories variously propose equating them with several Aegean tribes, raiders from Central Europe, scattered soldiers who turned to piracy or became refugees, and links with natural disasters such as earthquakes or climate shift. Well, here's the story behind the sea people and the dates that they believe these events occurred. All right, now, the sea peoples are purported seafaring confederation, a bunch of people that got together in the seas and then attacked ancient Egypt and other regions of East Mediterranean prior to and during the late Bronze Age collapse, which is a collapse of civilization. Again, It collapsed in the 1500 BC. And then I believe this is the next time it collapsed. This is the late Bronze Age collapse from 1200 to 900 BC. Following the creation of the concept in the 19th century, it became one of the most famous chapters of Egyptian history, given its connection with the words of William Max Muller. The most important questions of ethnography, the primitive history of classic nations. Where do they come from? Their origins are undocumented. The various sea peoples have been proposed to have originated from places that include Western Asia Minor, Aegean, Mediterranean, Southern Europe. They were, in my opinion, the last remainder of the Atlanteans, which were all over they traded all over the globe, it appears. And they somehow reconstituted their strength somewhere, and then just came back in mass and just wiped out the whole 9 yards. And nobody has any idea where they came from. And they always talk about the sea people, but that's as far as it goes. Okay, so don't forget now, even the scholars agree there was a collapse. They call it between 1200 and 900 BC. Now, that could be or may not be, because if there was such a tremendous collapse, there may not have been a whole lot of good record keeping during this. But Plato did say he heard from Solon, who heard from the priests of the ancient traditions in Egypt, that around 900 BC is when Atlantis collapsed. So that would put Atlantis being created after the first great catastrophe, because, as it said, things changed. Deserts became oceans, oceans became deserts. Well, it could be that the Sahara Ocean was only created during the 1500 BC era. Now let's take a look at that. All right, all of this area obviously now is desert. However, let's say after the first cataclysm, this was filled with water. It was just filled totally with water, this area. And there was a border line here over this whole area. And nothing could get out, and it was like a bowl of water here. And then when Atlantis collapsed over here, everything ran out. And everything did run out of here. I don't care what anybody says. If you can't see that, you got a problem. You got a real issue with your own self. That's nothing. That's nothing. And that's what academics say. You can point to something that is undeniable, just like the dragon. They say, no, it's impossible. I say, it's not impossible, it's there. No, it can't be there because it's impossible. I said, well, if it's there, it's not impossible. Yes, it's impossible because it's impossible. And that's the kind of thinking you have in academia. I'm not kidding you. It's that level of incompetence. It really is. It's just staggering. And I do understand why they can't speak. It's because of peer review. They'll be destroyed. And they just take a real offense to anything that points to the ancient stories being true and possibly God. And I'm not saying God, the God that everybody thinks of God. There's all kinds of gods. There was gods, and there was Zeus, and there was all kinds of crazy monsters and everything, if these stories were true. And I am starting to believe, well, I'm pretty well convinced now, that they were rooted in fact. How twisted they became during the ages, I don't know. But I read Hesiod. I go to the earliest sources. And he's the guy, Ovid compiled everything all the way up till the time of Julius Caesar. So he was a very, very good resource. Hesiod was one of the main characters in his compilation of the history of mankind up till Julius Caesar. I think that was like, I don't know, 37 BC or something like that. It was very close to the time of Christ. And I don't know what else to say. But we've been looking all over the Earth, and the Earth appears to be virtually 100% biological. And everything, as I showed you, Comet 67b, there was battles in the heaven. And I think they just threw creatures down to Earth. And, you know, these things couldn't have been living on the Earth. How could they live on the Earth? And there's bigger ones. You saw the one on the East Coast over here. They're everywhere. Now, how this happened, I cannot come up with answers. So this is the kind of stuff we would like. I'd like to dig into this deep, because I know a lot of people have some deeper research possibly than me about these ancient texts, and especially the Bible. I never read the Bible, and I was never a believer in anything that I didn't have hard evidence for. But now I have so much hard evidence, I cannot not believe. So I have to believe in the things that I have found and what they possibly could mean. But without looking into the possibilities, you're lost. And taking an opinion that none of this stuff can be true, it's just too fantastic, too spectacular. You can't come up with that nonsense. Well, if it's here, it is here. Right? If something is something, it is something. If you can't point to something, hold something in your hand, it's nothing. But if I say I have a goose, I guarantee you I have a goose that's turned into a stone, well, let's see it. And if I can show you it, I say it's there. And you say, well, that can't possibly be. A goose couldn't turn into a stone. Yes, it can. If it did, it did. And you can look at it, you can test it, you can examine it, you can see all of the detail of the anatomy. But it did turn into a stone, absolutely, because of something called nucleophilic substitution. If you don't pay attention to the details, you never get to the end of the answers. And that's what I find now. Even like Brian Forrester, I love the guy. He's going around all over the world. He's going to these places that I'm talking about, and he's asking questions, but I can see that there's no interest in the answers. And none of them, not a single one of them, seem to have an interest in answers. They only want to ask questions. And then just turn around and 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 around forever. I'm done with circles. I want answers to what you can see. Talk to me about this. And it's the same way right across science now. Science is a lost art, totally lost. Okay, I don't know how much further we're going to go today, but let's just pick up a little more on Velikovsky Reconsidered. Here we go.
Terrified, men watched the bright torch of heaven as it traversed its elongated orbit, menacing the Earth. Venus, a Chinese astronomical text recalls, spanned the heavens, rivaling the sun in brightness. Quote, "The brilliant light of Venus," records an ancient rabbinical source, "blazes from one end of the cosmos to the other." The fears of the star watchers were justified. As Venus arched away from one perihelion passage during the middle of the second millennium BC, the Earth approached this intruder, entering first the outer reaches of its cometary tail. A rusty ferruginous dust filtered down upon the globe, imparting a bloody hue to the land and sea.
All right, a bloody hue, ferrous oxides. That is where blood comes. That's blood. Now, the things that rain down on Earth, I think I have an explanation for, and they are biological as well, as is the giant red spot on Jupiter. And I think maybe I should leave it at this for now, because this gets into a very, very deep and mysterious and spectacular situation that I probably shouldn't start with today, because it's going to take you into a whole new world. So let's talk about that in the next video, I would think. But let's just finish up with a few more words for today, and then, like I say, probably the next video we'll get real deep.
The fine pigment chafed human skin, and men were overcome by sickness. Those who sought to drink could not. Rivers stank from the rotting carcass of fish, and men dug desperately for water, uncontaminated by the alien dust. Quote, "Plague is throughout the land, blood is everywhere," bewailed the Egyptian Epure. Quote, "Men shrink from tasting, human beings thirst after water. That is our water, That is our happiness. What shall we do in respect thereof? All is ruin. As recalled by the Babylonians, the blood of the celestial monster Tiamat poured out over the world.
The blood of the celestial Tiamat poured out all over the world. So what we have to do is look up at Tiamat. What's the story with Tiamat? And how could its blood pour out all over the earth?
But as the earth's path carried it ever more deeply into the comet's tail, the rain of particles grew steadily more coarse and perilous. Soon a great hail of gravel pelted the earth.
Okay, a great hail of gravel. So now we have blood from Tiamat. And then it started to turn into gravel.
Quote, there was hail, and fire mingled with the hail, very grievous, such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. So recorded the author of Exodus. Fleeing from the torrent of meteorites, men abandoned their livestock to the Holocaust. Fields of grain which fed great cities perished. Cried Epeur, quote, no fruits, no herbs are found. That has perished which yesterday was seen. The land is left to its weariness like the cutting of flax. These things happened, say the Mexican annals of Cuautitlan, when the sky, quote, rained not water but fire and red-hot stones. As our planet plunged still deeper into the comet's tail, hydrocarbon gases enveloped the earth, exploding in bursts of fire in the sky. Unignited trains of petroleum poured onto the planet, sinking into the surface and floating on the seas. From Siberia to the Caucasus to the Arabian desert, great spills of naphtha burned for years, their billows of smoke lending a dark shroud for human despair. Our planet was pursuing a near-collision course with the massive comet's head. Suddenly, caught in an invisible grip, the Earth rocked violently, its axis tilted.
All right, it rocked in the invisible grip is the magnetic fields that surround us, our atmosphere. Same thing with the Venus. Boom, the atmospheres collided, the invisible magnetic fields. That's what happens. And when that happens, you get push to shove, which creates glow and energy and heat and violence and electric discharges and all exactly the things that they're talking about. Let's just go back a second or two here so we don't miss this.
First with the massive comet's head. Suddenly, caught in an invisible grip, the Earth rocked violently.
Exactly. It would be crushed, basically, by this invisible grip of push-to-shove atmospheres.
Its axis tilted.
The axis would tilt.
In a single convulsed moment, cities were laid waste. Great buildings of stone leveled, and populations decimated.
All that is this on the Earth. All right, this is basically what we had happen. It's a Casimir effect, where two bodies of anything come and bash into each other. They create a glow in the middle. You two bodies like planets create a hell of a glow, which ignites the atmosphere, basically. All right, everybody had their own little story and their own little names for their gods, but Hesiod was the first writer of anything, and he wrote what the daughters of Zeus told him to write about our history. Now, the underlying concept of Hesiod's theogony are not exclusive to Greek mythology. Several Near Eastern cultures have their own religions and creation myths, and the similarities between them and Hesiod's theogony are striking. The Enuma Elish is the great creation epic of the Babylonians. It is the story of the creation of the universe and serves as the justification of the supremacy of the god Marduk, who defeats Tiamat, who we're just talking about, one of the two original divine beings in the world. These are the divine forever living creatures. Scholars have recognized many similarities between Marduk and Zeus. So Marduk defeated Tiamat. All right, we're going to remember these names and remember who defeats who, and that they were just called different names by different cultures, but they were basically the same thing. So like Zeus, Marduk is a sky god. Okay, so they were living in the sky. Apparently, that's what it seems, and they're just too big to live on the earth, and is of a younger generation of gods. So these were the gods prior to the 1500 BC destruction, and then down around the second destruction was when when we had more problems. Oh boy. This is when Venus came around a second time. So there's a lot of thinking to do here. But Zeus he cannot die. All right. They both battle to create order and both overthrow their parents to triumph. The Babylonians intended that the new Melish serve as a song of praise for the king of the gods, and that's Zeus. Similarly, since Hesiod's story tells the tale of Zeus's triumph, we can assume he intended the theogony to serve not only as a creation myth, but also a form of praise and honor to Zeus, the Greek king of the gods. So Zeus was the god of gods, and he killed the dragon in the desert. As far as I can determine, that's what I'm thinking of right now. The Sumerians had their own system of gods and goddesses, and their gods was An, the sky god and the supreme authority, Inanna, the queen of the gods, goddess of sexual love and war. They had more wars and desires, and the whole thing turned into a mess. Inanna, the queen of the gods, goddess of sexual love and war, Enlil, the storm god, and one active in Sumerian gods, also they're prominent in Gilgamesh, the oldest epic in existence. Gilgamesh's story has similarities to the military aspects of Iliad and the journey of the Odyssey. Nothing but wars. The mythology of the Hittites included what has come to be known as the kingship in heaven myth. Though the complete story is unknown, kingship in heaven bears many similarities to the theogony. Think about this kingship in heaven. I'm going to show you a picture I just got. It blew me away. The first god of heaven, Alalu, is overthrown by Anu, who assumes his role. His cupbearer, Kumari, challenges Anu and eventually cuts off his genitals and swallows them, and then tells Kumbari that he has become impregnated with several divinities. Kumari then spits out something which probably included the genitals of Anu. At this point, the text breaks off and becomes difficult to make out, but similarities between this myth and the theogony are striking. I mean, it's just so bizarre. How can you possibly take this in as reality? But Rhea and Zeus were mates, and Rhea got really mad at Zeus because he gave birth to Athena by himself. So she gave birth to Typhon, Typhonius. Now, they're showing different names down here, but Typhon was the serpent, the gigantic serpent with his head cut off, or his throat slashed in the desert, as far as what I can determine. We've got a lot of thinking to do and a lot of work to look through this, but it's unbelievable, and you almost want to just turn away and say, I just can't even think about this, it's just too much. But you know, after 10 years of looking into it, I can't see any other way that it's. I mean, it appears to me to have all the validity of what was written. The evidence on the ground is so spectacular and so unexpected and so supportive that you have to start to look at this as reality. This was not just silly people writing silly things. And these different events of catastrophes apparently were both related to Venus coming close to Earth. So you had the 1500 disaster, and then you had another one down around, they say 1177 BC, somewhere around there. The societies collapsed. Hold on one second. All right, this is a breakdown of all from chaos where there was nothing and the void to where Earth was born, and then desire and darkness and night and doom and dreams and rest. I mean, it's unbelievable. All the way down till we get to Zeus and Athena. We've got the whole line, the Titans, the Cyclopses. When were they born? Who were they born from? The sea, the mountains, the sky. I mean, these were all given. You know, they were transformed. They were metamorphosis. Ovid's Metamorphosis. I don't know if I talked much about it in this video. I probably did. If I didn't, we're going to get into Ovid's Metamorphosis very deeply, because that is what this talks the whole thing about. It was Hesiod. This is Hesiod's theogony, but Ovid drew on this, and then every other story that was told, and they all very, very similar stuff. So there's just so much to go through. I'm going to cut it off for today, and then I love you all. We'll talk later. Okay, by the way, this diagram of all of the gods is from this YouTube Hesiod Theogony by Timaeus, and the other one I would recommend is Ovid, the Metamorphosis Ovid audio book, book 1, part 1, and they have a bunch of different parts and of the books all the way down through, because Ovid was Ovid writing in Metamorphosis, very, very prolific writer. And these are the kind of things that people, and they said this was the most important book written, other than possibly the Old Testament. This is really, truly what was written in history, and if it's not looked at in that way, we're really missing everything, because it is spectacular. But as I have shown, I hope you've seen, the things that I have shown are spectacular. They just cannot be denied anymore. So we have to look back at these things with a little different outlook on what we're looking at, and not just jump to a conclusion that can't possibly be right. We need to investigate and do some scientific actual research, which is what I did. And I found out that these things do hold water quite well.